Oh, here you are, face to face in this trashy bar. Another glass and I am going places. Makes me laugh about the irony of everything.
Oh hey, it's Wes, and today I'm a little bit late on this one, even though I got this on launch day. Wedding season gets started and things just fly out of control. But we're finally going to talk about it. It is the Godox V850 Mark III. This might seem pretty familiar to you. I didn't do my classic overheating video because there are no surprises inside this flash. There is both a combination of things that we've seen before and, well, really nothing else. And I'll explain that, starting with the categories, as always, the build quality. No surprises here. This flash looks exactly like the V860 Mark III. We have the new through-body battery. We have the same tilt-back head. Everything looks completely identical superficially, except, obviously, we're lacking an LED here. Oh, and one little surprise here that might help us out. We don't have a Sony hot shoe. Now, if you already had a Canon or a Nikon, you wouldn't be seeing this plasticky hot shoe from the V860, but since this doesn't have TTL anyway, this just has a plain, manual, universal hot shoe with a pin in the middle, center pin fire. So this has ups and downs. If you're a Sony user, that means you don't have the somewhat brittle plastic hot shoe, and that's going to give us a small plus for our build quality, surprisingly, with this cheaper flash. Overall, again, no surprises whatsoever here. We are bringing in the same numbers as the V860 Mark III. Our build quality is a 9 out of 10, and I actually have had to bump the V863 down a bit from a Sony perspective, just because it has that plastic hot shoe, which I've had no issues with myself, but a lot of other people have that snap off. Thankfully, it's easily replaceable. Moving on to feature set. This is where things get different. A lot of flashes on this table here. If we start these up, we can see we still have the old user interface from the old V850 Mark III. Now, I think that this screen is a little bit nicer. It has really nice contrast and clarity, but it has very limited scope. So if I press the menu button here, we have one of those classic old-fashioned Godox menus that a little hard to decipher. You kind of have to go into the manual to figure out what all this stuff does. And although you can control other groups, let me have a look here, switch it to transmission mode. You gotta cycle through them one at a time. It is quite cumbersome. Whereas on the V860, if I'm in transmit mode here, I can see all the groups at once. Very easy to control them, and I've got hotkeys for each group. You can do the controlling, but you don't have a channel scanner and you can't control them very easily. Also, as we mentioned before, we don't have the modeling light / video light on the front here. We don't have TTL. We do get that lean back head, which is great for bounce flashing. Speaking of bounce flash though, let me demonstrate something. If I'm in my manual control mode here, and I pull this out, and do that again next to the microphone. When I pull out the diffuser and bounce card, it automatically zooms out to give it that diffusion spread. Now, let's try this with the V850. It does nothing. I did not expect them to remove this from the features, or rather not include it, but when you pull that bounce card out, it does nothing at all. So you have to manually crank your zoom back out all the way to the widest setting. Plus, on the R2 Pro 2 controller, let me set these to different channels here. You got receiver, Group B. Got my 860 on Group A. There's a certain button you can press on this receiver when you've selected a group, and it fires just that flash. So that fired my V860. If I switch to channel B, it doesn't do individual group firing. What a bizarre technical limitation. I would have thought that this would come from the transmitter and not include any sort of a support on the receiving side, but apparently it does. So when I was using this in the studio as a key light or a kicker light, very interestingly I found that that function doesn't work. If I want to test it, I have to press the test button that fires all of them at the same time. I would say that this isn't going to be a huge issue because most people using this flash are not going to be using it as a part of a studio setup. They're going to be using it as a run and gun on their camera, if they're not someone who uses TTL, which would be me. And finally, one of the biggest features this has is it does get the newer battery, and we do have a good battery meter on here. It has 3 bars, so you can see it go down just like the battery meter on the V860 Mark III. And if anything, it's easier to see on the V850. So, got that new battery with good fast refresh times. It's supposed to be a more reliable battery, and I believe that it is. I have barely seen any complaints about this battery in the groups online, whereas the one in the V860 Mark II and the V850 Mark II, so many battery failures. So this one seems to be doing a lot better. So overall, we are missing a lot of features here, but it will get the job done. It's a 6.5 out of 10 for feature set. Moving right along to usability. Although this is a dead simple flash, and many people hated this little toggle wheel on the V860 because you knock it on things and change settings by accident. Hasn't happened to me a lot, but I can definitely see where they're coming from. It's very fiddly. This has your nice solid wheel for adjusting your output settings, and it's always adjusting the output settings. See, I hit this wheel, and it's not doing anything. I have to press this and then do this, and then go back up. Anyway, it's a few extra steps on the V860 Mark III. It's not the best user interface. They could have done better. Whereas this one, it's kind of a tried and true thing. It's very easy to use. But because of the limited display, it is harder to do multiple channel control. Not everything is as easy. Doesn't have the automatic zooming on the head. Does have the tilt back, so a lot of ups and downs for usability. I mean, we don't have TTL. That is a deal breaker for a lot of people with regards to usability. Maybe not for me. Overall, I'm going to give this usability of 6 out of 10, and most of that is coming from the very antiquated user interface. Not much to say here. We've talked about the light quality on these before. It is exactly the same as the V860 Mark III. No surprises. It's solid, but not amazing, especially compared to like a studio strobe. So we're gonna give that an 8 out of 10. If you wanna get some more out of this flash, check out my cheapest flash setup, where I use this flash to create great outdoor portraits. What you need is an ND filter, a flash stand, and maybe just a giant white sheet. You can shoot it from behind the subject, give them a little rim light, light up that sheet, light up that reflector or umbrella, and get the job done with one cheap flash. I have a whole video about that if you want to check that out in more detail. And if you want to modify this with a Bowens, which I've done many times, you just need to use an S2 bracket. S2 bracket, one of the most versatile and useful things that you can get for a flash kit. Next up is value, and this is where we expect to get the job done. So how do we do? Well, unfortunately, we have inflation, everything's getting more expensive. This one comes in at $200, which is still behind the V860 Mark III for $230, but it is ahead of the V850 Mark II, which was $180. Just a little more, but a little bit goes a long way when you're in this budget category. Then we also have the V1, which is somewhere else in this room here, for, in the US dollars, an exorbitant $260. A lot of places in the eastern side of the world, it actually costs a lot less. And we also have the TT685-2, it runs on AA batteries for $130. That is a lot less. So obviously this is a value leader for 130 bucks. It's a great deal within the Godox lineup. But if we expand beyond that, we've got like the Westcott FJ80 for $330, $344 for Sony. And of course, way out of the ballpark are the Profotos and the first-party Sony, Nikon, Canon flashes. So in the grand scheme of things, this is cheap, but it's not a slam dunk when it comes to pricing. So that's an 8.5 out of 10. So overall, what does that get us? That gives us 38 out of 50. not the best score. Let's see how it stacks up. Yeah, it actually ties with the TT685 too, because although we have a worse value, we gain some features that the TT685 doesn't have, but at the same time we don't get the new screen that the TT685 gets. This is a tough one, because the TT685 gets the new interface, but it still doesn't have that lithium-ion battery, but it costs less. That is hard. Let me know what you think about the V850 Mark III and where it fits in with the marketplace. Does it have a place anymore? Is there anyone that should be getting this ahead of anything else? It is tough, because I feel like if you want to go cheap, you should be getting the 6085 Mark II, but if you want to go expensive or you want to spend just $1 more, just get the V860. That is hard. If you want to buy any of these products, I've got links down in the description below. You can help to support this channel and feed my fat cats. If you want to see any more of these image samples, again, check out the link in the description below to see them in higher quality. But until next time, go take some photos.